calendar as well. Slipstream is absolutely vital out of turn 14, the Catalunya corner, and then you stretch the legs on these Moto3 machines down to turn 1.047 kilometres long. Just behind the Jello and Coaters of August. Straights on the calendar, and as I mentioned, it provides a great overtaking opportunity at turn 1, then you've got the fantastic turn 3. I love seeing the bikes come out of there, and then turn 4 is a great overtaking opportunity. Turn 5 is as well, and of course the famous turn 10 Prix here at the circuit of Barcelona, Catalunya, and of course turn 14. We've seen some famous moves made down there, haven't we? I remember last year in Moto3, Jose Antonio was absolutely wonderful from turn 14. He picked the pocket of Tyre Sato on the last lap to get himself into the top 2, finishing just behind the race winner last year, the man of Paris, of course, Moto3, who went on to win the title. We did have a long lap penalty at Moto3 here last year as well. So who's going to win this year? Well, we're going to find out in a few days, of course, and this is potentially, Keeper, the only dry weather, dry track time we're going to get today. It's 13 degrees out there, it's very breezy as well. Can't quite remember which direction the wind is going in. We've got to be careful in the opening few laps to work that one out. Don't get caught out, don't make an early mistake, because if this is the only dry running we're going to get on Friday, you don't want to then be going into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and qualifying, of course, with very limited track time. And chuck it down the road early doors in FP1.
Looks like that when you go down towards turn 1 at the moment, doesn't like a few flags up and see how the comms ones, but really the bigger thing around there in Moto3, one bike, of course, Moto3, Moto2, so throw it at the fence and you do risk losing a lot of track time, which, okay, that might not sound like the worst thing. It looks like practice is going to be held in wet conditions, judging by the weather forecast, but it might not be. We were saying about the weather all weekend in Le Mans, and in the end it was quite different to what we expected.
Yeah, Moto3 obviously got a wet race over in Le Mans, but we were expecting that to continue throughout the day. Moto2 got away with it, and then MotoGP also got away with it. If the race was an hour later, it absolutely would not have got away with it. A horrendous downpour for a couple of hours after the race had finished over in Le Mans. Thankfully, we did miss that. Moto3, of course, didn't, but it was good to have a wet race anyway. Great for the riders, of course, but good for the spectacle. Fair play to Max Mokiles for doing the job in very tricky conditions.
Got to say, just before we move on and have a little run through all the Moto3 stars, about that downpour on Sunday at Le Mans, obviously we'd have all come off air by that time, but when we were leaving the track it was still hammering down, and I've got to say, kudos to all of the teams, taking down all the hospitality units, packing away all the boxes, and then they come here and it does exactly the same on setup days, Tuesday and Wednesday. I mean, there are some jobs in the paddock that, even for me, I love being in the paddock, it just wouldn't float my boat. And really, hats off to every single one of them. The guys that are doing all the setup in all kinds of weathers. We went out for a few drinks with some colleagues elsewhere from TNT, and they were de-rigging as well in the rain, and it's miserable. When the sun's shining and the drinks are flowing in the paddock at the end of the day after a good result, that's when the highs are the highest. But when it's raining and you're packing away in the middle of a back-to-back, that is no way to go. So big shout out to all of the members of the paddock. Right, let's get on with it. Eddie O'Shea's top at the moment. Best result last time out, right up inside the top 10. Not.
Yeah, great to see O'Shea finally showing what he's capable of in Moto3. Obviously top of the standings at this early stage of the weekend, with his first top 10 in Moto3 last time out. And it wasn't just a flash in the pan on Sunday. Qualified automatically into the top 14 on Friday with P14, then qualified in P10. And then, of course, went on in the tough conditions to finish P9. A really good job done from Eddie O'Shea, because teammate Joel Kelso had a really good weekend as well before this crash, of course, in the lap conditions. But yeah, O'Shea was, of course, very happy to come away with his best result of the season, and he said felt like he had a little bit more pace in hand, but of course, seeing a lot of riders crash, very easy to get down the road in those conditions. Cold, windy, wet, Le Mans screams crashes, and we saw the likes of David Williams, Alvaro Carpe, for example, two leading contenders in the championship, took it down the road. So O'Shea just wanted to not make any more risks, bring it home, and a great job doing to finish inside that top 10.
Ryan Ariarte crashed twice. He's still got a point though, which just had a quick look at Matteo Bertelli. Let's talk about him if we can. Fantastic ride in dodgy conditions last time out. He did as well have a long lap penalty to contend with. But Matteo Bertelli, I'm a big fan of him. He's a really, really nice kid. And I've got to say, coming off the back of what was a horrific injury last year, he missed this round here last year. He's come back to the podium last time out. Doesn't matter whether it was wet or dry. He's had the pace since he touched back now. At Jerez. So big kudos to Matteo.
Great to see Bertelli back on the podium. I'm sure I speak for pretty much everyone around the world watching in, tuning in. If you're a MotoGP fan, you probably know what happened to Bertelli. Actually missed 13 Grand Prix with several of you that depicted the clips in that big podium over in Austin. It's been a long road back, and he did say last year once he returned, it was probably a little bit too soon. Since Austin finished MotoGP in the race, and they did pretty much spot and he was well in the podium over at Jerez, and then back as you say, with a long lap penalty, into conditions to finish inside that top three, back in the box for the second time in his MotoGP career. After everything it's been through, it's just wonderful to see Bertelli back inside that top three, back to what we saw at the start of last year from the Italian. He didn't say he was quite there yet. He's obviously last three Grand Prix in the mention. He's been slowly but surely getting to where he wants to be. He's still got a little bit sort of performance to play with, a little bit of time to fight. But Bertelli is not too far away from being fully fit and being serious for heading again for MotoGP. It's great news for the Italian and great news for the Pentier, who've done a lot of faith in Bertelli, and he's like to repay them with that after what happened last year, because who knows what could have happened after that. There was doubts about whether Bertelli would be able to race again, let alone finish on a podium again. So it's a fantastic story, and as you mentioned as well, he's a fantastic guy. Speaks a lovely chap, and just fantastic to see those stories in motorcycle racing when people like Martin in MotoGP hit rock bottom and are able to pick themselves back up and
Team box Alessandro caught up with him after as well. Just so happy, so pleased with Matteo Bertelli as a rider. As we say, he's been through the middle a little bit. He actually said, I had the pleasure of speaking to Matteo Bertelli in TV interview after, that when he crossed the line to start the last lap, he started crying because that it makes the MotoGP team to actually get back towards the pointy end of the season. It could round off that topic from there. Matteo Bertelli is in 9th place, 1 place over rider in the sprint of Kelso. What could have been really last time out at the moment now. Up inside top 4, top 5. But unfortunately, a crash took him out. Very, very unfortunate in the wet conditions. But Michael Lapsey's Hondas have definitely found some performance in 2026.
Yeah, they have, and with the help of Kelso's experience and speed, of course, he's really brought that team forward, and obviously Moto3, but also Kelso now really getting to grips with that Honda, and he said the Australian overall it was a really positive weekend right from the up on Friday. He was right in the front row mix, of course, stuck in the front row on Saturday afternoon. Great to see Kelso back on the front row his first time on board that Honda, and of course he was right in that victory fight as well, and said he wasn't really pushing too much, he was feeling really comfortable, the pace was strong, and it was still early in the race, and then obviously very early on in the race, unfortunately just lost the foot without too much warning, he said, and yeah, down the road he went, unfortunately, in a potential podium, definitely a top 5 on the cards for Kelso, which would have been a great result. So unfortunately the results don't really speak volumes of sort of Kelso's progress so far this year, up inside that top 10 again, but it does feel like now, Kelso said this in the 7th, it's really starting to feel like the old Kelso again, the one last year, the one challenge for victories on numerous occasions. So yeah, it was great to see Kelso now on a regular basis, not just in the wet conditions where it can be a bit of a leveler, but in every condition. Saturday, Sunday, Kelso was right there. That DNF over in Austin as well, really, when he was right in that top 10 mix. So yeah, this is now we start to see for Kelso as we expect to see Kelso. his speed and experiences very much getting to grips as we see Joel Esteban and Rammersdorfer getting a little bit too close for comfort down at turn 10. Rammersdorfer left the door open out for Esteban, and Esteban obviously decided to walk on through. Rammersdorfer got a bit of a wake-up call there from the 70.
Yeah, Joel Esteban's home GP as well. He was always coming through there. I think Rammersdorfer was on through the position. Well, definitely got a wake-up call, as you say. Just to finish on goal, Kelso, if we can. First time in a row with Honda Machinery last time out. Got in front of here as well last year. Second place, finished 7th. And his best performance actually here in Barcelona. But he is still chasing that first top 10 of the season. So we know that Kelso is quite a challenger for the podium. He's just got to try and find his way through and onto what is a kind of feeling that he's facing here to get into the top 10. We'll have a look at Scott Ogden, crashed last time out in the team's home GP, but his teammate just ahead of him, number 11 of Adrian Cruces, currently 10th in his session. Fine ride for Cruces. He was up there in the top 10, finished 7th, and it was, I believe, his best GP result so far.
Yeah, it was exactly that, and to do that in front of the team's home fans was a top job done from Adrian Cruces. He's quietly going about his business in Moto3, 8 points rides in the opening 11 Moto3 Grand Prix for Adrian Cruces. He was pole here back in 2024 in the Moto Junior class as well, so Cruces has good pedigree around here, and we also have a lot of cancer too, as we've got the yellow flag somewhere on the circuit. Don't quite know where yet, but we'll still focus on Cruces as we're mentioning him. That is then Matani, unfortunately. It's gone down the road at turn 10, looks like to me, on the exit. The first crash at turn 10, and certainly won't be the last this weekend.
Yeah, the crashing hotspot, isn't it, down there? You can see all of his leathers scuffed up on that left-hand side. So Zen Matani was 16th last time out, still chasing his first point of the 2026 season. He's actually up there at the moment, was up there towards the top 10, 16th at the moment for the session, likewise as well. This is taking Rios. Rios, who last time out was a DNF, but he has had the top 10 already this season, thinking back to his 9th place over in Jerez. He's been a winner here in Barcelona in the Junior GP category, 2024 and 2025. And last time out was back in the Q2 mix, the first time since Prix. So even though the result didn't come in France, Rios trying to come through, and at least on circuits that he knows, get himself up in the qualifying standings as well as the race results.
Yeah, DNF unfortunately for Rios last time out, for the top 10 over in the ref, and that was after he got deducted a couple of positions as well for being a little too aggressive, got to say, in the last few laps. But like you say, it was inside Q2 again in France, so he was Rios on the 54. We're starting to see what he can be capable of in Moto3. Enrico Samelo, we're just watching now. I think it was a weekend to sort of forget for the number 27. He was chipping away at things, got to be said, and I don't think he was too disheartened by the progress he was making throughout the weekend. But of course, that DNF and a crash on Saturday morning as well over at turn 2 or turn 1 or turn 3, whichever way you want to look at it over the one. I think it's pretty much turn 2. Fast right-hand kick for the 27. Enrico Samelo unfortunately crashed as well on the Sunday, and he did describe it as one of the toughest weekends they've had this year. Did say that once, it was a pretty good race, feeling strong and making positions, but then of course we saw what happened, a massive crash on the exit of turn 11, I think it is, when you took it through the Shimano Buff S's at turn 10 maybe, who knows, whatever, doesn't matter, the Shimano Buff S's, and then the bike. I can imagine the team watching what the bike did in the gravel, tumble rolled 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times. Thankfully the young Finn was all okay. But yeah, he admitted afterwards, Samelo, that it was his mistake, but he's uninjured, which is the main thing. And I think getting back to a circuit where he's more used to winning the 27. A lot of these riders, of course, more used to the circuit of Barcelona, Catalunya compared to Le Mans. I think it should be a better weekend.
At the moment, we are just over 15 minutes done in this one so far. Adrian Fernandez. Indonesia, Aldo Carpe, Max Keelan and David William in the top 5. Michael Martin top 6th and 7th, Brian Ariati 8th, 9th for Crusade. Marco Morelli is in your top 10. Top 10, this is the number 10, Nicola Carraro, who is really just not having a very fun season of things at the moment, is he? He's not had a point yet this year, so never had points in Barcelona in Moto3 either. So tough weekend perhaps in the offing for Nicola Claro. We watched that in Denise. Normally quite quick in the wet. Spoke with him after though in Le Mans. He was pretty shocked with just how tricky that place is in the wet in the Moto3 bike. Came over the top 10, so points on the board for Denise. But as you can see, he's flying at the moment up here in second place, and he's got red sectors all the way through the track so far this lap round. But Denise, potential wet or dry really. Last night at Le Mans, he's got a big exciting prospect.
Yeah, 100%. Second top 10 of his Moto3 career, P10 in Brazil, then back to with a P10 over in Le Mans last time out as well. So equal best finish, and was in and around that top 10 throughout the weekends. We know from Red Bull Rookies Cup last year that Denise was phenomenal in the wet. I think he crashed in the second race and still came away to finish on the podium. Obviously, going from Red Bull Rookies into Moto3, completely different prospect against more experienced riders, very fast riders as well. When you've got the likes of Keyless and Adrian Fernandez up from 31, just in front of Anthony Denise on the track at this moment in time, but can't take anything away from Denise. Yes, I think expectations, including from us, were raised slightly when we saw the wet weather coming. We knew that Denise was very, very strong in those conditions. But you've got to remember, he is a rookie, lacking experience, and yeah, I think he just found it a little bit surprising how much of a difference riding the Moto3 bike was in the wet compared to riding the Red Bull Rookies bike in the wet. Of course, similar machines, but different specs. Moto3 a bit behind spec compared to the Red Bull Rookies, faster and more sort of race ready compared to the Red Bull Rookies bikes. But don't take anything away from Denise. A top 10, chipping away at things is Denise, and he's a really exciting prospect for Malaysia. We know we've got a huge support over in that side of the world, and number 13, I have no doubts in the second half of this season, and maybe even earlier, is going to be challenging the podiums in the dry and maybe in the wet.
Can't wait to see what he does when he opens a pang in November. He's going to be a real star over there. He's top at the moment. Oh no, 148.783. Excuse me now. I did actually say excuse me. I pulled the mic away because I didn't want to cough anymore. We're looking at Cormac Buchanan. Special livery for the Code Motorsport KTM. There's subtle touch of the Catalan flag. Comes across the line. Cormac Buchanan moves up a space and goes to 24. Got to say, we were kind of backing him to do big things in Le Mans. He definitely did big things. He may have said that we fancy him in the wet. Well, he had a great start. Soon fired himself out the front door, though, didn't he? And out at turn 6 on the opening lap. So Cormac Buchanan looking to redeem himself here in Catalunya this week.
Yeah, we may have had a little flutter on Cormac Buchanan in the wet conditions, and rightly so. We know, yeah, of course, keeping it nice and steady, nothing silly, but we're having a look at the odds, and Cormac, obviously with the dry performance and the odds these days, there's a lot of more riders who are tipped to be better than Cormac in the dry conditions, but in the wet we were very much thinking that Buchanan would have been right in that podium fight. I think he would have been, but unfortunately the crash at turn 7 on the exit on lap 1, which was unfortunate for Buchanan, and I think thankfully he wasn't injured in that crash. He was had a few big crashes, and did say over in France that he was starting to feel back to his old self after a couple of difficult Grand Prix, recovering from the big high side he had over in Brazil, and then he had another big one in Austin as well. Qualified in P15, which was his best qualifying of the year so far, and yeah, was sort of well on course to finish inside that top 6. But as I mentioned, you know how easy it was to crash, and when you know you've got a good result ahead of you, Buchanan knew that he had a good result coming if he could just keep it upright. Unfortunately, yeah, the New Zealander chucked it down the roads. As I say, thankfully he is all okay, and he did describe it as a tough pill to swallow. Made a big step forward on the Saturday, showed there can be fast in dry conditions, and of course that was actually shown with his best qualifying of the year so far. Just couldn't quite get it together in the race, but I don't want to sort of keep any sort of you don't want to challenge riders too much when they crash in those conditions, because Uriarte crashed twice, as you mentioned. Munoz crashed at the third corner as well on the opening lap, then Buchanan did as well. Alvaro Carpe crashed and several others as well. It's fair play to the likes of Fernandez and the likes of Quiles, and of course Patel, who's only stood on the podium for going as fast as they did, keeping it upright and not making any mistakes. We'll obviously come on to talk about Fernandez and Quiles in a moment as we see Fernandez on our screens, but very, very easy to crash in those conditions. So yeah, I think the overriding feeling was for New Zealand a good weekend, another step forwards, and okay, it's a pill to swallow on the Sunday, but look at the positives.
17th in the grid here in Barcelona last year, DNF'd in the Grand Prix format. So a little bit of work to do here. Let's talk about Leopard if we can. Great performance last night out from Adrian Fernandez. Likewise from Guido Pini, who actually finally managed to come through a Q1 session, got into Q2, normally there directly, but unfortunately the last 2 rounds he's had to go via Q1, came through into 6th place at the Czech Flag, so a double top 6 for Mirjak Couture's team, and Adrian Fernandez back-to-back podiums for the first time over a year, so lots to celebrate down there in the Leopard Blue.
Yeah, and Adrian Fernandez now is the chief chaser to Maximo Quiles. 46 points is the gap, 69 for Fernandez, 115 a record for Max Quiles. We will get on to Quiles, don't you worry, in the not too distant future, because it was another phenomenal Sunday for Quiles, but also a very, very strong Sunday for Adrian Fernandez. Didn't quite get the launch off the line, did he, from pole position, his first of the year. Got sort of bogged down and made some good positions up actually in the opening lap. So I think P5 at one point, maybe P6, and then got himself up to P2. But Quiles was already head down and on his way, and Fernandez tried as he might to stick with Quiles. I think in the latter stages, Fernandez just admitted that he wasn't going to catch Quiles. Didn't want to put too much pressure on himself as well and start pushing too much and making mistakes, because 20 points absolutely valuable for Fernandez in this championship chase. Of course, back to his second place up over in Jerez with another second place. As you rightly mentioned, he got first back-to-back podium since Thailand and Argentina last year for Fernandez. And I make it that Fernandez hasn't seen the checker flag outside the top 10 since his America's Grand Prix P12 last year. It's his 11th top 6 in the last 15 races. It's been super consistent for Fernandez ever since he had that little bit of a lull, a little bit of a really disappointing batch mid-season last year. But since then, Fernandez has been really strong. Now, as I mentioned, he is second in the championship, and okay, 46 points to Quiles after 5 Grand Prix is a lot of points to make up, and we know how strong Quiles is, and we know how strong Quiles is going to continue to be in 2026. It's going to be a very difficult rider to beat, but Fernandez has placed himself in the perfect position, and when you can't win on a Sunday, like he didn't in Jerez, and like he couldn't in Le Mans, picking up T2 is exactly what you've got to do. 40 points for the last 2 races. I think Fernandez would have shook the hand at that one if he'd offered him at the start of Sunday over in Jerez. So fair play to Fernandez, really coming on strong again after quite opening few Grand Prix. Of course, saw this rider on the screen, Guido Pini, pick up the win over in Austin, which I don't think would have pleased Fernandez. Seeing your teammate win, even though they get along pretty much fine, that is the first rival at the end of the day. So I think Fernandez would have seen Pini pick up a victory, Luke, to see, of course, the Italian. But I don't mind the look of that. And fair play to Fernandez for responding.
Definitely come into the lines there and scored there as the Guido Pini. Got to say though, Leopard, bike on podium last week, so very strong stuff indeed. Just to finish on Fernandez, hasn't had his second podium since the Prix 2024. It's a bit of a tricky track this one for him. He hasn't really got a lot of great form. Fifth on the grid last year and in the GP, that was his best weekend here on the circuit of Barcelona, Catalunya. Marco Morelli at the moment 19th place, and really a story of what could have been in Le Mans for the Argentinian. Stayed in the points, but just cleared Fernandez. He was looking to give Aspar a 5th 1-2 finish in Moto3. And it wasn't to be. Tucked the front almost as soon as he got ahead of Fernando in the tricky conditions down at the corner on the final couple of corners. The Marco Rally in the end came away with 13th place. But for someone who qualified for us, who's been in the top 3 points throughout the weekend last time out, fair to say, but he would have wanted a little bit more than that. So you never know. Marco Morelli, decent-ish form around here. Front row and a victory here last year in Junior GP, and a competent victory showing in ETC in 2024. So this is a track that he likes.
Yeah, big fan of Morelli. I'm really excited what he can do for the rest of this season. Of course, the focus will be on this rider than number 28 on the other side of the box, Maximo Quiles, but Morelli is quietly going about his business. P6 in the championship standings, now 6-7 points away from his teammate. But Morelli hasn't quite got the points on the board that he's sort of really shown. Of course, had that fabulous podium back in Brazil where he nearly beat Quiles. Had a fantastic comeback in Jerez as well after a difficult start. Really lamented the qualifying position at the start of the race did Morelli over in Jerez, and that would have been a guaranteed podium if he got a better start. And then it looked like he was well on for the podium, as you mentioned, over in the Montpico, and again another rider. I don't want to discourage them too much, and just so easy to make a mistake. And unfortunately, I think Morelli just got a little bit too excited. He was in that podium position and then crashed. Still crashed to P13. When you're looking at the positive, you've got to try and take everything you can, and that's what he was able to do. But like a lot of the other riders who crashed, the overriding feeling for Morelli was he was happy because he was showing that he could be fast in every condition. And I said at the start of the year when we were talking about who was going to challenge for the championship, maybe dark horses, Morelli for me was a massive dark horse. We showed glimpses last year when he was riding for the MLab Honda, what Morelli could do, an underpowered and unfavoured machine. The Honda last year, the MLab box. Moving to Aspar, we know how much of a good setup Aspar is. Got great people around him, like Nicky like Jorge Martinez Aspar, and on the inside the box, we've got Quiles who is challenging for the championship. Quiles said himself over in Le Mans on Friday and Saturday, you know what, hands up, I'm not feeling as strong as I did over in Jerez, and I'm looking at my teammate and seeing that he's stronger, and I can also learn from Marco. It's not Marco just learning from me. Quiles a little bit more experienced in this last in Morelli, but I'm also learning from Marco, the number 97, on your screens here. And obviously this is now a home race for Morelli, as he described it, Grand Prix. So really, really excited to see what Morelli can do. Hopefully just gets a clean run of things this weekend. I don't think a victory between the car around the corner.
No, he's definitely going to get one on the board. It may well be this weekend. As I said, the last 2 years he's visited this place a couple of with some extra hand luggage. So for sure, Marco Morelli with that wonderful crash helmet. He has got one of the best crash helmets. It reminds me of, you've seen Top Gun. Please tell me you've seen Top Gun. You've seen Iceman. You've seen Iceman. That's the kind of crash helmet. Very, very retro spec. Crash helmet for number 97. Please don't ask me if I've seen any other films. We've already had this topic off air. Rider Riarte has been into P1 so far. He's worked his way through some trouble, as Andrea Cruz said. Riarte coming through turn 12. Really is turn 11, but for some reason we have one long corner, the left-hander at turn 10. Oh no, Cormac Buchanan has gone down. I hope that is a rather small crack. Cormac Buchanan has had a few big ones this year. Hopefully that's not one of them. Turn 5, so I imagine it's a cold front tyre. It's a given way. Rider Riarte, despite all that battle, has got there. I've been thinking about that long left-hander at turn 10. For some reason they've whacked a corner on the exit of it, and it's not a corner, it is all at this point. Please guys, when you're doing the corner runs and you're calling that, you not do that, because we all know last year Catalunya corner is turn 13. This is Cormac Buchanan. He's at least up on his feet, front end folding in through to one. Oh no, it's not. He's going to run straight on, so Cormac Buchanan just, there it goes. I'll tell you what, gets about out that because time will come up a little bit too soon. But Cormac Buchanan, but unfortunately, it is a crash, but it's not so let him.
Yeah, just getting it run down into turn 5. I mentioned turn 10 where Zemmatani crashed a little bit earlier on in the session. Was a bit of a hot spot, not a bit, a lot of a hot spot. A massive hot spot here at turn 10. He crashed at turn 5 is as well. 2 left-handers, of course, and that's the first time you're on the left-hand side of the tyre since turn 2 again. Another one where we see a lot of riders go down. So a mistake that we've seen plenty of times. Thank you, Buchanan was up and okay in trying to get that KTM fired and started for the final 5 minutes of this session.
Matani's looking over the shoulder, back a shot, and he gets a face full. I think that is a Pablo Carpe. Watching Adrian Fernandez, this is down the bottom at turn 10, and then apparently turn 11 somewhere around here, up towards the right-hander, and then it's right, all the way through. final sector. I'll tell you what, lap time is now starting to fall a little bit. We're still a long way off the lap record. 1:48.584 is what Bruno Riarte has done. I can tell you the lap record round here in Moto3 is 45.905. So still a little bit of rubber left to be put down and a little bit of time to be found. Of course, we are here in May this year, but these lap records were set back in 2024, none of which come from last year. 48.137 is for Adrian Fernandez. He bumps his way back into P1. Bruno Riarte there in second. Third back, Indonesia, who set that fast lap time early on. Prix has made his way up to fourth there, Marco Morelli. Carpe, David Bunyotto, we've got the result. Oh, Adrian Fernandez, that move is on, but probably not in FP1. He just picks up, you say Yamanaka, we've got yellow flags elsewhere on the track. Oh, that's turn 3. That looks like when the KTM have come to a stop. KTM, or is it?
Level of NTA
potentially, but then transponders moving again, so that's wait and see. But the yellow flag looks like over on the exit turns 2 and 3, so we'll have to pick that one up very, very soon. Morelli's just got up to second place. Jesus Rios, fantastic one. We said he's quick round here, and he has had victory round here. So Jesus Rios moves into third place, and we've got Sniper's team machine. Oh, Terbatali, that's a shame. We were talking so well of him earlier on. Terbatali's gone down to turn 2. I imagine that's a front end. That's the first left-hander for quite some time. We do see that, of course.
Yeah, I think I cursed it at turn 2. We mentioned turn 10, we mentioned turn 5, and then I spoke about turn 2 being a hot spot as well. That's exactly where Batelli went down. I did see a lot of gravel being chucked onto the inside line there when you flick it right back into the apex at turn 3. Batelli is all okay, that is good news, but a late crash in the session. Hopefully the bike isn't too damaged and not too much work to do for the mechanics down there. We should get some quicker times coming at the end of the session. This is Alvaro Carpe. Disappointing weekend last time up for Carpe. Big missed opportunity for Carpe to notch up a no score and see title rival Max Quiles pick up another healthy 25 points. Danish rises to P1. Good lap time from the Malaysian, 47.718.
Yeah, Danish, Carpe and Fernandez all going across the line pretty close together there, and all of them can get down into 147. Where do you say Yamanaka going? That's where he's going through the long lap as he just gets forced out by his teammate. There is a lot of rockery and stone out there on the turning point there at turn 3, so that'll be looked at. I'm sure we're going to get to the end of this. Well, yellow flags out again. I wonder what that's all made of. But we're going to, this time it's up at turns 11 and 12. So, Jesus Rios. Well, oh dear me, man.
Probably shouldn't be going back out.
Yeah, the marshals really shouldn't be allowing him back out onto the track. But, oh dear me, well, Hazel Rios. Well, we saw him with a tyre warmer wedged in the rear wheel last round. Hopefully that front fairing does not wander off any further from where it is. But Hazel Rios done a great job getting up into the top 3, 7th at the moment. So as the riders are pushing on here, late on, we are seeing that a few of them are finding the limits in the way they didn't want to. Everyone at the moment seemingly chasing Max Quiles. He's down in 13th as we have a look at the championship leader, working his way through turns 10 and 11.
Yeah, we'll delve into more about Quiles as we can over him on this afternoon, of course. This is Fernandez.
That's the second
time think that was going to get a bit close. Up the inside of Uriarte, the number 51, who's having a decent session. Uriarte up inside that top 10. But it is Fernandez who's on course to go P1. Potentially, Hakim Danish might re-overtake Adrian Fernandez when he crosses the line. Carpe on a good lap time as well. They're all pretty much in the same vicinity. Fernandez chasing Quiles, P1 and P2 in the championship, but it is Hakim Danish who does improve to potentially end the session on top here in Barcelona.
Fantastic. Checkered flag out. Wow, Adrian Fernandez, what's he had for breakfast this morning? Oh, he's going off the apex there. Adrian Fernandez, every time we clap eyes at him, he's a bit scrappy, isn't he? Deary me. I tell you what, Max Quiles would have been caught by surprise. I could just imagine that Simon Crayford's going to have a little look at that and perhaps a little slap on the wrist coming away at the 31. Hakim Danish at the moment is the number 13 who is leading the way in P1 at the moment here in Barcelona. Alvaro Carpe has moved himself up to third. Great lap there from Rico Salmana to put him fourth. Adrian Cruz says Marco Morelli, Jesus Rios, who's made it back to the pits, thankfully. Ahead of Bruno Riarte. Joel Kelso coming to the line. 9th place, had the moment to move up. As he does, moves up into 7th, just ahead of Nicola Carraro on track. Guido Pini has taken the flag as well, just behind. He's in 18th place, so a slow start for the number 94. It's a Gorman at the moment, usually leading the top 10, but a flurry of lap times and a flurry of incidents, and there goes Scott Ogden. So Scoggers has crashed, that's turn 5, and I imagine that one is a front-end tuck. Scoggers, who's 20th at the moment and under 19, is going to need to have a little bit of an improvement later on. It's Soren holding his collarbone now. Ooh, now there's no saving now. It's a
Yeah, fortunately for Ogden, he did have left shoulder surgery in November after his Valencia crash, and that was his left shoulder. He was just moving around there, so hopefully there's no damage done to that left shoulder for Ogden. As we mentioned, turn 5, that is a classic turn 5 crash here in Barcelona. Alvaro Cartes pushing on in that third split. Can he hold it around the final corner of turn 14 of Catalunya before the short burst to the line here in Barcelona? Where's this going to get Cartes to? Is it P1? No, he improves his time but stays P3. But a confidence boosting session for Cartes. He was really disappointed after that crash a few days ago on Sunday.
And Quiles has moved up into his 12th place at the moment, just ahead of Moto3 and David Newman behind Barney Arte. So that is all she wrote, and that is Hakim Danish, who leads the way. P1 for the number 13, 1:47.478, about a second and a half off what the lap record is, but it's a bit cold out there this morning as we watch Ryusei Yamanaka. I think we're watching along MT Helmets, MSI, old credit machine there, but it is Hakim Danish who has found his way to the top. I can already hear the Malaysians who are cheering on out there in Kuala Lumpur and all around. Fantastic stuff from Denise Fernandez, second in the margin of speed. Alvaro Carpe, fine third.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sal Mella as well, we mentioned that his crash was very disappointing for Sal Mella last time out over in Le Mans, so a good start to the weekend for the Finn. This is Fernandez, of course, we're watching. Feisty Fernandez, I'm going to call him, in FT1. Was getting a bit busy there, wasn't he? But clearly hungry to reap more success on home soil as the number 31, the lead Honda in the championship and in the session. A replay of what happened between him and Uriarte up at turn 12.
Yeah, he'd already done this move to Ryusei Yamanaka earlier on in the lap, and then what we really needed to see was him cutting across Max Quiles there, but never mind, we'll have to rewind and watch that one back in the video, Pascal. Danish on a 47.478, as you can see, 1.5 off really where we have seen the Moto3 times go, and that was done by Dan Alonso a couple of years ago. So who else is up there in the top 10 that we can shout about? Gotta say, Geiso Gorman, I just got nudged out towards the end. You say Yamanaka doing the nudging, who's there in ninth, but it's his teammate Hakim Danish who leads away ahead of Adrian Fernandez. Alvaro Carpe will stay up there in third. Rico Salman and Adrian Cruz completes in the top 5. Marco Morelli, the Argentinian, in 6th. He is from Barcelona though, so it is technically a kind of MotoGP. Max Quiles, championship leader down there in 12th. It is the Little Romeo Dynamo Intact Machines of Darren Munoz and David Almanza 14th, 15th. We barely spoke about them, so I'll make a note of that to touch on later. Bringing up the rear, Cormac McCann was a crasher on his way to 25th. To minor, fellow crasher in Ben Matani, Nicola Ferraro, rounding out the order. And that is all for myself, Kiko Giles, Lewis Sotheby and Elliot York are taking you through Moto2 FP1. Enjoy!
Good morning, everybody from Barcelona. A rather gloomy start to our 6th Grand Prix weekend of the season. A busy start in Moto3 as Moto3's 26 rider pack already began to dress rehearse for Sunday afternoon's Catalunya Grand Prix. Always trust the lightweight class riders to swap elbows even when it's a free practice one session. It's Moto2 up next as we begin to focus upon a World Championship which is currently being heavily dominated by Spaniards. We have Spaniards 1 and 2 in the World Championship. In total, we have 7 of them in the top 10 in the Moto2 World Championship after 5 rounds. We'll look back through our winners so far. 4 different winners in the first 5 races, 3 of which are Spanish riders. There's the Marc Marquez fans with the Colombian flag, so certainly they have loyalties across MotoGP and Moto2. David Alonso will certainly be their focus in this upcoming FP1 session in the intermediate class. He's one of several riders who has quite the story to tell from his French Grand Prix weekend. Once again, for the 3rd time in 5 races, we had a shortened Moto2 encounter at the French Grand Prix, but we crammed plenty of drama and intrigue into those 9 laps. And they've really given us a fascinating title picture heading to the Catalan Grand Prix. It's a 9.5 point gap, but it is now a different rider in 2nd place, chasing our points leader, Manu Gonzalez. Lewis Sedamy and Elliot York are with you to talk you through the Moto2 action across today and tomorrow. We're looking at the 2022 winner of the Catalan Grand Prix, Celestino Vietti, but his thunder was stolen by another Boscascoro rider in the lineup.
Yeah, good morning, mate. Hello to everyone just tuning in. It certainly was, wasn't it? Ethan Guevara, of course, we are talking about what a weekend it was for the number 28 rises to P2 now in the overall championship standings. And it was pretty much the perfect weekend for Guevara. Last time out on French soil, was fastest on Friday, stuck it on pole position on the Saturday, and then, of course, went on to win the Grand Prix on Sunday as well. And obviously we had the restart after the initial start, and both times fair play to Guevara, absolutely nailed the start on both occasions. The same can't be said for a lot of riders that we'll come on to as well. But Guevara, I think now, as he's mentioned already this season, but he reiterated it again after the Grand Prix, he is now riding as consistently at the front and as well as he has done in his career. We know that he was a title winner back in 2022 in Moto3, but this is the Ethan Guevara we've been waiting to see in Moto2 for a number of years. Expectations were high. Here he is on your screen, 2nd in the championship, 70 points, 9.5 behind Manu Gonzalez. And I think the big thing for me coming out of the weekend was Manu Gonzalez, when asked if Ethan Guevara is a championship threat, Manu says absolutely. In fact, I see it as me and him. He is my main rival for the championship because he's the most experienced and consistent rider on the grid alongside myself. That is the words of Manu Gonzalez. And when a title challenger and a championship leader so far in 2026 is saying that about you, you know that you've got people worried. And Guevara, as I mentioned, we've been waiting to see this for a number of years in Moto2, but finally we are seeing the Guevara that rose through the ranks of the road to MotoGP, then won the Moto3 title in quick succession. It took his time to get going in Moto2, but now we are seeing a title contender and someone ready to potentially, if rumours are to be believed, move to MotoGP very, very soon.
I have to say, when I heard those comments, if I was in a particularly mischievous mood when he described Ethan Guevara as his title rival this season, I would have thought, not your teammate Manu. Perhaps we'll come to
exactly that
as we go through the session. Celebrate just lost 2nd place in the World Championship with, by his very, very high standards lately, a slightly disappointing result. 7th place, but I guess where he qualified, he would be pretty pleased with that. Well, I said there are plenty of riders with stories to tell from their French Grand Prix. Some story of glory and delight, others of heartbreak and disappointment. Here's one in the form of Philippe Salac. He could pretty much write a book on his French Grand Prix weekend. Absolutely wrecked his Calex on Friday morning with a crash, which he then responded to by getting himself into Q2 automatically. Took his first front row in some 47 starts since late in 2023 in Lombok. Only been one ride, I think. If only Danny Holgado hadn't, well, if only Jorge Navarro, excuse me, hadn't crashed, brought out the red flags, he was in a very strong position.
Yeah, Salac was really disappointed after the race because he said himself that he knew that he could challenge for the race win, and after the technical issues in the morning, followed by that huge crash at turn 3, as you mentioned, Lewis, and then sticking it on the front row, and he was in 2nd place, wasn't he? He picked off, I think, Manu Gonzalez on that opening lap before, and we saw in the background as we followed the lead and saw him have his off at the final corner, and then Salah didn't get it hooked up on the restart. He was on the right, as I mentioned, unlike Ethan Guevara from pole position, who absolutely nailed his start. Salah unfortunately didn't nail his restart, and then got caught up. I think it was Seneragius on the outside of him coming into turn 3. There's a little bit of contact, no one really at fault, but that sent Salah wide and through the gravel up through the Dunlop chicane, turns 3 and 4, and then I think he was back down to sort of P17, the Czech rider, and then fair play to him, got his head down and made up positions to get inside that top 10, but Salah left France feeling very, very disappointed, knowing that he had the potential to at least be on that podium, and he said he was very, very in that fight for the win. As we're going to look at Danny Holgado, that is why we got this one.
All present correct. Unfortunately, it wasn't for Danny Holgado in the haste to get his bike back out there so he could take his grid position for the restart. Remember, Holgado, as I briefly alluded to, incorrectly describing him as the reason for the red flag. He crashed the lap before the red flag came out. High-sided coming out of the museum corner. His bike went for a journey halfway up the straight towards turn 8, and the team, unfortunately, sent him out without the front fender, front mud guard. Well, you want to describe it. It is part of the aero body of a Moto2 bike, so you're not allowed to send that bike out onto the racetrack without it fitted. Yes, it didn't slow it down too much, and I wouldn't imagine it would have made the bike any quicker. Danny Holgado only took a checker flag in the bottom end of the points anyway. But I guess, perhaps, as mentioned, in the haste to get him back out, the team perhaps not agreeing the rule book. Most famously, I think back to Austin a few years ago when Ethan Guevara was first Moto3 and we had Gino Borsoi, who was then the Aspar team manager, walking down the pit lane with a bright yellow rule book in his hand. Perhaps his successor at the Aspar team, Nico Tron, used to think through the technical regulations ahead of this weekend. An improved weekend for Danny Holgado in Le Mans, but that is now just 5 points from the last 3 Grand Prix since his win in Brazil.
Yeah, lost 46 points, I make it, to Gonzalez since Brazil, and that's why Holgado has gone from the championship leader down to P7 overall. Lost a place again to Ivan Tola, we'll speak about Tola, of course, in due course, but Holgado just needs to get his season back on track. It was a much more positive, as you rightly mentioned, Lewis, weekend over in Le Mans. Back to what we were used to seeing Holgado doing for a lot of last year, of course, and at the start of this season. This is why Colin Fire had him on that LT for the Grand Prix here in Barcelona. Fair play to Colin for sort of owning up to it, and this is the Dutchman in the garage. A disappointing weekend for Fire. But he said, yeah, my mistake, sort of admitted that he just lost his cool a little bit. He was trying to fight for positions and just got a little bit overexcited, and of course ruined Danny Munion's race as well. So fair play to Ryan for holding his hands up and saying, yeah, I admit it was my mistake, I'll take the penalty in Barcelona and try and move forward. But yeah, back to Holgado, just needs to rediscover some momentum, get some points on the board. First and foremost, of course, last year he was dominant around here, pole position to the victory, sort of where Holgado properly announced himself as a Moto2 rider, and I think for the years of a lot of people, including some MotoGP teams as well, because I think it took us all by surprise last year with Danny Holgado, and of course coming into this season when he finished P3 in Thailand and then back up with a victory in Brazil, we thought, okay, here we go, Holgado is making a name for himself and he's really going to challenge for the title this year. That can still come, of course. I'm not ruling out Holgado by any means in the championship case. He might be P7, but he's 41.5 points behind, which sounds a lot at this stage, and it is. But Holgado, I think, is going to another couple of good results on the board. He's right back in this title chase. A long, long way to go before pretty much December when we get to Valencia. But Holgado was singing from a more positive energy over, which is first and foremost what he needs to do after really disappointing rounds over in Austin and then again. So that was the positive for Holgado. The negative was he crashed on that one and then got disqualified at rookie points. So if we go green here, Holgado on home turf will be hoping for a lot more in this week.
17 Grand Prix still to go. He's at 25 points, and that's a good calculation to work that out. So Danny Holgado does still have plenty of time to find himself back into title contention, particularly in a class like this, where we do tend to see different winners. And most Grand Prix we go to, it's not the kind of series where a rider is going to run away at the top of the World Championship. Manny Gonzalez, as he did for much of last year, leads the World Championship, having led it for all bar the Brazilian Grand Prix when Danny Holgado briefly went ahead of him with that victory there. Gonzalo, of course, won the season over in Thailand, won back the championship lead in Austin when Holgado had an absolute stinker. He's won it ever since, but the lead has never got into double figures so far. This 9.5-point lead that Gonzalo's had is the biggest lead that he's had so far this season. As mentioned, it is now Guevara that is the nearest challenger, having taken that second place from Senna Aegis. Session underway then. Let's just draw your attention to a couple of replacements, a couple of riders that you need to perhaps keep an eye on who you won't have seen regularly. Still no Angel Piqueras. We regret to inform you down in the MSI squad, although if you've been following our Moto2 coverage over the last few Grand Prix, that will not surprise you. Expecting him potentially back in around a month's time. Asset potentially a target for Piqueras against a back onto Moto2 machinery. Now previously he'd been replaced by Marcos Ramirez, but he's busy this weekend in World Supersport action at Most in the Czech Republic, so his place this weekend has been taken by Unai Aradre, who did compete here as a Moto2 rider last year. He's second at Alex, and the right you just saw on the second of the forward machines, another familiar name. And if you're a regular to Moto2 action, you saw him twice at the end of last season. Xabi Zurutusa is back. He's in for the injured Jorge Navarro in that crash coming out of the last corner. And they brought the red flag out at Le Mans. He actually broke a finger in his right hand. So his place this weekend is taken by Zurutusa, who will be a regular with Aspar in the European Moto2 Championship, which gets underway very, very soon.
Yeah, sending our best wishes, of course, to Angel Piqueras. This is Unai Aradre, who's jumping on Piqueras' machine, as Lewis mentioned briefly there. Good luck to Aradre this weekend. But yeah, sending our best wishes to Piqueras, of course, the Moto3 winner here last year was Piqueras, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we see Piqueras on a bike very soon. We spoke to team personnel over in Jerez, and of course, before that, over in Austin as well. Of course, Austin is where Piqueras picked up the injury on the Sunday. It did sound like it was obviously the extent of the injury is going to be lengthy there for around about 10 weeks or so. I don't think we're going to see Piqueras for the summer break. Hopefully we do, but the main thing for Piqueras is to get back fit, because obviously he's looking to challenge him for the title, unfortunately, this year. But we know the potential Piqueras possesses, and we don't want him coming back too soon. The team won't want him coming back too soon and doing more damage. And of course, the same goes for Jorge Navarro as well. Hopefully to see the experience of the night back on the grid pretty soon. A shame for them to both miss their own Grand Prix. They've got several of them. Of course, the Spaniards for Grand Prix to race in Spain, but Barcelona is always a special one for the Spaniards. So yeah, hopefully we see both riders back on track very soon indeed.
The other weekend on after this Catalunya Grand Prix, we are in a very frenetic and relentless stage of the season. Weekend off next weekend before we then head into another pair of Grand Prix which are back to back. Those are Michelo and Vallotton. Weekend off almost back before we actually once again after a go and Assen. Consecutive weekends. Another weekend off as well. And then we're back in July for the German Grand Prix and the Saxon Ring. So an awful lot of points to be played over the next couple of months or so. So an injury at this stage of the season can potentially damage your prospects, whatever those prospects are, whether it's to fight for a World Championship or just to get yourself up to speed in your rookie season, as Angel Piqueras was looking to do. Speaking of which, Jose Antonio Rueda is starting to do that. Here is the Moto3 World Champion. Ultimately, didn't score any points, 17th in the end, having lacked the kind of race pace that we'd seen from earlier on in the weekend, but he saw the French Grand Prix as a real turning point in his rookie season, and I'm inclined to agree with it.
He absolutely said Rueda after the race that he was very happy with how the weekend went overall, made some solid steps forwards, felt good on the bike and really enjoyed it, which challenging for the championship. And sure, Rueda will be doing that at some stage in Moto2, potentially in MotoGP in the future as well. But good to hear that the former number 99, now the number 98, is enjoying himself on that Moto2 machine. And didn't quite show the pace that they had on the weekend over on Sunday, but as we know, it's very, very easy to crash and go down the road on Sunday. Moto2 was dry, but a lot of riders were making mistakes, so Rueda, first and foremost, kept it on the straight and narrow and got another race under his belt, and was P2 finisher here last year in Moto3. The last three occasions where he's been here, all in Moto4, of course, he's finished on the podium, so expectations won't be the same this time round, of course. Who knows? From Sunday, that might change. It'd be great to see Rainer back on the podium, but I don't think that's going to happen this weekend as he continues to get back up to speed, the reigning Moto3 champion, but he did have one on that penalty to the podium here last year. So if it's sort of any circuit, I know the Rainer won a lot of circuits, last year he stood on the podium on a lot of the circuits. But if there's any circuit, judging from the history books, where Rainer could potentially pick up points again in Moto2, maybe this will be.
Let's reflect then on what we saw in Le Mans more generally a couple or a week ago. It was like ages, but it was only 5 days ago. And Ethan Guevara's victory, which, as we've discussed, has really catapulted him right back into the title conversation at the very top end, if he was ever really in any sense out of it. 9.5 points off in second place, and it felt like a statement win for Ethan Guevara at Le Mans. Because, of course, we've seen him win before in Moto2, won the final race last season in Valencia. That was more a very fast start and a strong rearguard action, not to take anything away from him, but obviously did it to defend. That's a circuit that's perhaps more conducive to defending a lead. The Ricardo Tour circuit is very difficult to overtake. I think the big difference with this victory for Ethan Guevara is from pretty much Friday afternoon, if not before then. It was clear that Ethan Guevara was the fastest rider in Moto2 all weekend. Of course, a lot was thrown at him. Had to take his first Moto2 pole position on the Saturday. We were then uncertain what kind of track conditions we were going to have for the Sunday. The track was drying out in the run-up to the race itself. He had a red flag thrown into the mix as well. And whatever was thrown at Ethan Guevara, he had a pretty confident quality to it.
Yeah, exactly that. I think telltale sign is 2 times this year he's qualified on the front row. Thailand was second, was pole position last time out, went on to finish second in Thailand, and obviously won the race. Yeah. The French Grand Prix. Sorted qualifying out in France, did Ethan Guevara, and after topping Friday, very easy to obviously not sticking on pole position in the front row on Saturday, but he did just that and held his nerve, as I mentioned, in both restarts. It was a dramatic Sunday, because we've had a lot in Moto2, but if you like, it's only the full over. Whatever was thrown in, it wasn't a straightforward weekend in terms of weather, never is over in Le Mans. Guevara just had the answers, and from what he was saying after the race, that he's got the confidence to feel like he can fight consistently at the front and be part of the championship battle this year. It says a lot about where Guevara's head is, where the team's head is as well. He's always got the likes of Paolo Valencia in his camp, in qualifying Park Ferme, right down there in the box. Paolo Valencia, of course, Yamaha boss, looking on. So that was a bit of added pressure on the shoulders of Guevara when you've got, the bosses of Yamaha, of course, have got their name on the blue through Yamaha Moto2 machines. Start of the season, you'd have said Guevara is potentially going to move it to MotoGP. I said, yeah, potentially, but he's got to have a good start to the season. He's got to show that he's ready to win more races and fight for the championship. That is absolutely what he is doing. And as I mentioned, this rider on screen, when he is saying he feels like his main rival at this stage of the season, he needs Guevara, then you've got to listen to Manny Gonzalez, because he's been in the championship champion for last year. Beaten to that by Diogo Moreira, who is now in MotoGP. Guevara just unravelling a weekend like that, like we've not seen him do ever in Moto2. Won in Valencia last year in different circumstances, but to go out in Le Mans, difficult conditions, and pretty much dominate from start to finish in the weekends. Potentially going forward here to start the weekend with a bit of time in the final sector. But I think now it is safe to say, I think we could have said this maybe a Grand Prix or 2 before, but I think now Guevara is one of the main protagonists in this title.
Another key figure, we just saw him there in the front box, Gino Corsoy, who was the team manager at Aspar when Ethan Guevara won the World Championship 4 years ago, and clearly his style of management really gets the best out of Ethan Guevara, although he's not necessarily the most hands-on nature as such in something Moto2. I think that's really the Joe Bastian, just a former Moto2 Grand Prix winner in his own right, but there is so much winning experience inside that track Yamaha Moto2 lineup, and he clearly believes now that he can fight for a championship in Moto2. Perhaps he maybe didn't even as far as a week ago. He now genuinely feels he's one of the elites in this Moto2 class, and from the way he won his Moto3 crown back in 2019, of a World Championship battle. Everything he's raced in, from the European Talent Cup to the Moto3 Junior World Championship it was at the time, through to Moto3 World Championship, everything he's raced in, he's won it.
Exactly. 2019, I'm saying European Talent Cup champion. 2020, first year in Moto Junior, went on to win the championship. Second year in Moto3, won the championship. And this is why we're saying this is now the really Impact Guevara finally standing up in Moto2. Just lost his way a little bit in the first couple of seasons, but slowly but surely got his confidence back and has become a much more grounded rider as he potentially improves on this lap time around. He does, sits in the top two in the championship, currently sits in top two in this session. But as we mentioned, he does look like and sound like a completely different rider this year. I think picking up that victory to end the season in Valencia, for any rider going into the winter, having got a debut win in the class, whatever class you're in, going into the winter, how much confidence that must give you, and the team, as you mentioned, Gino Corsoy, Paolo Pavesio and Alex De Angelis around you, supporting you and believing in you. And as we think, potentially already got pen to paper on a jump to MotoGP next year, which is a massive pressure off when you know what the future is going to be. Neil that is confirmed, don't take my word for it, but I think we all think that is exactly what's going to happen, especially now the results that the Guevara's unfolding. To have that sort of put to the back of your mind, not having the stress and worry about trying to find a ride next year or putting that extra pressure on the shoulders. Guevara is a completely reformed character in 2026, and he's not going to go away this time.
Tsunaya ran away. He's strong start to life. The MSI Callus one is currently up in 11th place. I was hoping we'd come back to David Alonso down at that spot, because the two teammates, not that they necessarily are the most helpful of teammates to each other, as you saw once again last weekend when Alonso ran into Danny Holgado as they were battling during the race, and certainly David Holgado's prospects not looking better in the end, of course, with his squad and finishing. But they're 26th and 27th at the moment, of the 27 who set a lap time. Also, some 4 seconds off the pace. Holgado's some 2.5 seconds off the pace. So perhaps some early issues down there at that spot. Guevara now to the top. Ignore what you can see top of your screen. Zarathustra hasn't lapped this circuit in 12 seconds. That would be some going on there. Obviously on that forward every weekend, you can get around this circuit as quick as that. He's clearly taken some sort of shortcut.
12%, I mean, whatever shortcut it is, it's a pretty good one to get that lap time in 12 seconds. Yeah, from the time on the screen, right, you just get in a little bit confused there.
Jack Abdelard's currently consulting the bookies to see what else he can get on Zarathustra to win this weekend, given that he's 90 seconds clear of Guevara currently in this section. That's why the timing tower has disappeared on the left-hand side of your screen. So they're trying to get to the bottom of why that lap time is registered for Chevy for the Zarathustra. So in actuality, it's now been disallowed. So we can get the live once again. Guevara top by a tenth of a second. Here he is. From Manu Gonzalez. Barry Bounters is up in 3rd place from Alonso Lopez, Aaron Canet and Philip Salax. We're right to get excited a little about Jose Antonio Rueda. He's just got 7th on a 1:43.187. El's already told you of his very strong Moto3 record around this circuit, so perhaps this could be another opportunity for Rueda to take a step forward. Then we have Colin Bryant 8th, for Denis Onchu 9th. And Ivan Ortola completes the top 10, and Ortola certainly one of the stars of Sunday afternoon at the French Grand Prix. It's difficult at the best of times, though, to get yourself onto the podium from 14th on the grid, much less when the race distance is only 9 laps.
Yeah, when you're doing it twice as well, from 14th on the grid. Ortola got a brilliant start in the restart and was right up inside that top 5 pretty much from the opening couple of laps, and Ortola admitted after the race that that tasted like a win, and you can understand that as well. I think starting from P14, you don't really expect, especially as you mentioned in the race, eventually was 9 laps long, to be challenging for a podium. Ortola would have fancied himself a definite top 10 and maybe pushing that top 6, but even Ortola, I think, would have thought a podium was a little bit out of reach, especially when the race was shortened. But fair play to Ortola. He's had a couple of difficult Grand Prix. The team and himself were really rugging hard to get back to sort of where he was at the tail end of last season. 7 top 10s last year for Ivan Ortola. 4-time winner, of course, in Moto3 as well. Pedigree does Ortola coming into this championship, and showed a little bit what he was made of in his rookie season last year. Of course, jumping onto the Alex from the Moto3 chassis was a little bit of a jump and sort of took time to get used to, especially after what sort of he was saying was a difficult couple of Grand Prix. But when you're having a difficult couple of Grand Prix and still finishing 10th in Brazil, of course, had a great opening weekend with a P4 over in Thailand, but 10th in Brazil, and 11th in Austin, and then a P10 on Hangzhou in Jerez. It's not great results, but certainly not bad results when you're struggling. So great to see Ortola sort of figure things out in tricky conditions, on 14th in the grid to put it on the box. And he's really consistent in the form, actually. I make it 15 point scores in the last 16, 5 top 10s in his last 6 as well. So Ortola really going about his business quietly, but now very effectively as well. And as I mentioned, he's now ahead of Danny Holgado on the championship. I think we would have said to Ortola after 5 rounds he'll be ahead of Holgado, especially at 4th Brazil when Holgado was top of the championship. Ortola would have been, oh, okay, that sounds pretty good. And to get your first podium of the season ahead of your home Grand Prix for Ortola and a lot of these riders, of course, a real confidence boost, and good to see Ortola back inside the top 2.
We'll never know what will happen had they made the opposite decision, but they will feel vindicated in their decision to swap course and score for Alex this season. Certainly Ortola's current situation, 6th in the World Championship, would suggest that they're happy with that move. Although, of course, we are talking about Boscoscuro having won the last Grand Prix and Ethan Guevara 2nd in the World Championship on it. So clearly, different ways to skin a cat in this Moto2 World Championship. The last 2 Grand Prix to be held here in Barcelona, the last 2 Catalan Grand Prix, if you just forget the solidarity race at the end of 2024 for a second, have been won by Alex and Boscoscuro, with Ayagura's victory here back in 2024. Aaron Canet then getting the carriage with the second visit to Barcelona late last season, and then of course last year with Danny Holgado, the winner of this race. 4.6 kilometres in length, just under 2.9 miles, the circuit to Barcelona Catalunya circuit. Notoriously abrasive, notoriously tough on tyres as well, although faced with cooler conditions this weekend that perhaps we'd be used to. You'd accept that coming to the circuit of Barcelona Catalunya at the end of May, just before we head off into June, you'd expect it mid-20s, perhaps high 20s in temperatures, but it's overcast on this lovely day. It's cool, and there is certainly more of a possibility of a bit of rain interfering in the action later today.
Yeah, absolutely. We are expecting rain to come a little bit later on this afternoon, so potentially today this is the final dry running we're going to get in Moto2 anyway. And it's 5 or 16 degrees today, which is pretty sure I have to put my jacket on in the commentary box. It's not going to be a very warm day for the fans flocking here to Barcelona, but I think it does warm up for the rest of the weekend, which is good news. But yeah, today a little bit of added pressure thrown into the mix in Friday practice. Not that we need it, not that we need any more drama on a Friday, because it's basically mini qualifying sessions in Moto3, Moto2 and MotoGP. But yeah, some wet weather might just throw a few different names at the top. Manu Gonzalez, one of those riders we mentioned in Le Mans, won't be wanting wet weather because famously Gonzalez, not in the dry conditions of course, but struggled a little bit more in the damp conditions. So that could just throw a few cats amongst the pigeons ahead of qualifying later on into the weekend, of course, on Saturday. But yeah, not potentially going to be the sort of cleanest weekend in terms of weather here in Barcelona, which is not always a bad thing for spectators and commentators and fans around the world, but obviously not what the riders want.
He's never finished on the podium here as Manu Gonzalez in his Moto2 outings. Certainly not at the Catalan Grand Prix, hasn't knocking the door in the Solidarity Grand Prix running late in 2024. But going back to last year's Grand Prix, when of course he was trying to defend that World Championship lead, spent most of the race stuck behind Ethan Guevara, who was so difficult to slipstream past, and an outbreak at the end of the 1 kilometre main straight here. So Gonzalez certainly will be hoping that history doesn't repeat itself this year, that he's spending much of the Grand Prix staring at the rear tyre of his closest championship rival. It's weird, isn't it, for Manu Gonzalez, because he's not had the blistering race-winning pace really at any stage this season. Of course, it was a victory that he fought hard for in Buran at the start of the year, managed to snatch it in the latter stages from Ethan Guevara. We've had a weekend so far this season that Manu Gonzalez has dominated in the same way that he did for many events last year. But what he guess he has found this year is that consistency of podium finishes, and you say about Manu Gonzalez and the pace he's had so far this season. He's certainly raced with a championship mentality, with the sort of long-term mindset and view of how this season is going to play out. 5 Grand Prix this season, and Manu Gonzalez is now winning the country fourth.
Finished outside the top 5, of course, his work came over in Austin with a P5 when he was 9th on the grid, so I think he'll come back over the Grand Prix of the United States for Gonzalez. I'm really enjoying how he's going about his business this year, Gonzalez. I think a lot of questions were asked after the way he ended last year, very disappointing into what looked like it was, well, he definitely was favourite for a long time last season to pick up that debut World Championship, Grand Prix World Championship, I should say, title. And, you know, sticking with the same team, missing out on the MotoGP promotion as well. It would have been easy for Gonzalez to just get a little bit down in the dumps and not come out all guns blazing in 2026 and just sort of lose his way a little bit, but fair play to Manu. He's answered all the questions, he's got his head down, and he's really got stuck into the 2026 and shown again why MotoGP's team should be looking at him and why he's a regular victor contender in Moto2 and why he's going to be a championship contender again. Found that consistency, obviously won over in Thailand, fantastic win over in Thailand, and hasn't won since. Has seen 3 riders win since, including his teammate twice, of course, over in Austin and Jerez Senna ages, but has just chipped away at it and finished on the podium in the last 2, P2 in Jerez, P2 in France. When, alright, there might have been a rider just a little bit quicker. Guevara, of course, that's his teammate over in Jerez. But Gonzalez is doing what he needs to do. Only 9.5 points clear. Gonzalez knows, again, that he's a championship contender. As I mentioned, I do really like the way he's come into this season and picked up where he left off in 2025, because he didn't leave in phenomenal circumstances, but he's really discovered his mojo, and that's great to see, especially when you've got Senna ages on the inside the box. We've gone back-to-back race victories, easy to get a little bit demoralised, but Manu knows that he's not found quite that feeling he had last year. Speaking to Jürgen Miller, he's mentioned it as well. They've not quite got that Alex trying hooked up like they did last year on Manu's side of the box. He's not feeling terrible, of course, that's shown in the results. He's not too far away at all, but he's not quite firing on all cylinders, and that's why we've seen the likes of Guevara win ahead of Gonzalez. I do think over in Le Mans, and Gonzalez said this as well, that he just got stuck behind Alonso Lopez in the restart. Just lost just that, I believe, 1.2, 1.3 seconds that Gonzalez lost, and ultimately that did cost Gonzalez a real chance of trying to pounce on Guevara. But now he's racing, can't say anything else about that. Gonzalez should have potentially put himself in a better position. He want to praise on Guevara for his start as well. But just to round off what I'm saying about Gonzalez, I'm really impressed with how he's gone about his business so far.
I guess to that point, to being stuck behind Alonso Lopez in the stages, and Gonzalez has only been on the front row once this season, qualified third for the Spanish Grand Prix. He's found himself on the second row on a couple of occasions, and even the third row on a couple of occasions. So perhaps that's one area that Manu Gonzalez would feel he needs to improve upon if he's going to turn some of these podiums into more frequent victories. Yes, podiums really dried up, didn't they, in the latter stage of last season. Of course, one of the few podiums he did take in the latter part of the season, he got disqualified from Jumbo back in Indonesia, which really did punch a big hole in his World Championship leads. Ultimately, he didn't recover from that apology, I would say, at this stage. It's an apology to all of our Indonesian fans, because we've not brought to your attention the big news of yesterday here. So I was looking on the Italian screens at 27 names, and one thing I didn't have 28, what I'm reminded. But unfortunately, Mario Aggi withdrew from this Catalan Grand Prix yesterday. Now, we saw Aggi uncompetitive by his 2026 standard back in Le Mans, qualified 23rd, only finished a couple of places higher than that. And then he went for a medical examination on Monday on a right hand issue. And unfortunately, rightly yesterday, the decision was taken that he wasn't continuing to compete in this Grand Prix. He has withdrawn. Rotten news out for Mario Aggi, who's just can't buy any injury luck, can he?
No, unfortunate for the Indonesian to miss what is his second home Grand Prix. Of course, the Honda team Adrian plan live over in Barcelona, I do. A lot of some riders as well. Yeah, unfortunate for Aggi. Did say at the end of the Grand Prix over in France that he was struggling physically and not really understanding what was going on. He said he was struggling with his arm during the race, and as we know now, he's got a right hand injury that's been picked up and has ruled him out of this weekend. So fingers crossed, it's not a big one, and he can get himself fixed, then ready to go again over in the Jello. But that would explain partly the reason why Adji just struggled lately. He's shown glimpses, hasn't he, Adji, that he's getting to grips with Moto2 and Friday he was inside that top 10. Was the same in Brazil, same in Thailand, showing flashes, but yeah, France, we saw him outside the top 20 on the Friday, qualified outside the top 20 on the Saturday, and then crossed the line in P21 on Sunday, which was not what we were used to seeing from Adji, and obviously now we have the explanation. So yeah, just sending best wishes to Super Mario, as he's fondly known as, from his millions of fans around the world, mainly of course over in Indonesia, and hopefully by Mugello in a couple of weeks we've got hopefully a fully fit, but if not pretty much fully fit Adji to try and see the Indonesian kickstart his Moto2 campaign.
Alonso is slowly climbing his way up the standings. It's an improved lap time. He's still down in 24. Of course, we wind the clock back 7 days to Friday in Le Mans. We were at this stage a little perplexed, and then on Saturday morning rather concerned as to how David Alonso's weekend was going to pan out. I think if you told us how it was ultimately going to end up, we'd have been impressed. And I guess if you'd offered David Alonso on Friday night when he was really struggling with that right shoulder, or even on Thursday when he wasn't sure if he was going to race at all at the French Grand Prix, if you told David Alonso that he was going to get out of there with a fifth place and be just 31.5 points off the World Championship lead, I'm pretty sure the young Colombian would have snapped your hand off.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you told him the race would have been only 9 laps, I think.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I'll have a bit of that. Yeah, fair play to Alonso, because we didn't know at the time, but heading to the circuit on Thursday, Alonso wasn't even sure he was going to be able to ride, and it was the insane ones when we sort of questioned why he was so low down the order, struggling a little bit on the Friday. Centeragius rides to P1 in this session. Good to see the 8-1 back at the front of the session. Just quickly diverting off topic as Agius goes to the top of the standing to look at his top speed, because that's where he's been struggling this season. P17, 291.8 kilometres per hour, around about 6.5 kilometres away from the top time of Autonomous. So not too much, but yeah, watch out for Agius this weekend on that 1 kilometre long home straight, because that's where he's been struggling with top speed so far this weekend. Struggling over in Le Mans was David Alonso after the training crash, and I think he rightly so was looking at a P5 on Sunday. I think he would have absolutely taken that, especially after Friday. Coming through Q1 as well, let's not forget, was 18th on the Friday, and then stuck it on P7 on the grid, and then finished, as we mentioned, in 5th place. And a weekend which maybe promised more, but obviously we learned that the strain on his shoulder meant that a P5 was a great result, and he was very happy to walk away with a P5. Said Alonso tried to go for 4th place, but then saw that he couldn't do it, preferred to hold position, so there was more in the tank for Alonso, but I think he just used his head, which was a wise thing to do. He's had a few more days to obviously train and recover ahead of what is pretty much over Grand Prix for Alonso as well. Colombian and Spanish parents, and always special to race in Barcelona for Alonso. So I think we're going to get a different Alonso this weekend. Obviously, it's not started too well. I don't know if there's a little bit of a technical issue on the bike. We saw him speaking to the team down there, still in P24. So hopefully that's not the shoulder playing up. Hopefully it's more of a bike issue. But of course, we'll get further into the weekend and learn more about Alonso. But it is 6 races now without a podium. I think if you'd have said we're going for the first 5 races and Alonso hadn't even done the podium, I think we'd have all sort of, whoever was saying it, laughed about the paddock, saying absolutely no chance. But of course, that's why motorcycle racing works. It's elite sport, injuries can happen, and Alonso has now risen to P5, as you said, in the championship. But he's now 5 points away from Gonzalez. Long way to go, as we mentioned. Not ruling in and out, especially that Alonso in this championship. A podium for me has to got to come quite soon because we've seen Gonzalez, we've seen Guevara, ages who've won two of the last three Grand Prix. There's a lot of riders, more so than last year, that are in this title fight that are capable of winning races. Now Alonso, as soon as he gets one podium and a victory, I think he'll go on to do that for longer. And obviously with that shoulder injury, picking up the P5 was a really strong result over in France. So yeah, I think we're going to see more of Alonso this weekend. I do feel like he's got to come soon.
Yeah, he doesn't want to give up too much ground in the World Championship. 31.5 points at the moment. He trails this man by Manuel Gonzalez. He said injuries can happen. A lot has happened for David Alonso. Injuries can happen. Bikes breaking down in front of you and crashing into them can happen. Incorrect tyre pressures in qualifying can happen. A poor start where the bike went into neutral, that can also happen to David Alonso. And that's all in the first 5 Grand Prix of the season. It's been eventful. But his last 4 results really hit the four the number 80, and again, I guess it's to your point, fifth place he took in the French Grand Prix. He'll probably look at that much more favourably and with a little more quiet than he will be three previous results. Developing 2 previous results where he left a little bit on the table, should have been a little higher in the order than he was it. I think you can have a was the maximum given that he didn't really have the pace in the race, but certainly those 2 faults in Austin and Perez. Had he executed the perfect Saturday and Sunday, could have been talking about back-to-back victories there for David Alonso. So the potential is certainly there, but it isn't quite going to into gear just yet. This might be an opportunity to do that out though, because we've already mentioned Jose Antonio Rueda's very formidable Moto3 record around here, 3 podiums. Well, David Alonso can trump that. He's won here on 3 occasions.
Yeah, he certainly has. Winning here in Moto3, of course. He was 8th last season after coming from 25th on the grid. So Alonso, as you can pretty much say anywhere in Moto3, pretty much won the hot 14 races once he started winning campaign. Alonso needs to pick up a good point. I do feel like